imagine this. You live in America with your family. Your husband is in the military. And then suddenly he gets injured and he decides to do a different career. He thinks, why don't we move to New Zealand and I'll become a chef? So you move all your family to the other side of the world and you start again. How would that look?
Hearing all of these people talk about how prohibitively expensive New Zealand is, I sat Scott down, because he's the money guy, like a couple of different times, and I was like, we need to have a talk, because you're telling me that we can afford to live here, but from what I'm hearing.
In this week's episode, you're going to meet Katie. Katie was that wife who moved with her family to the other side of the world to start a completely new life. And you're going to find out exactly what that looks like.
It's a Drama, coming to you from Taranaki, New Zealand.
Hello.
Daddy, I love him!
Mother thanks you.
Right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Katie, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I can't wait to find out all about your story. We chatted briefly yesterday and we were like getting really excited, going, oh, we could talk about that, we could talk about this, but I just said, no, let's wait until tomorrow and let's just share it with the world. So could you just tell everyone who you are and how you came to be in New Zealand?
Sure. Our story is probably similar to a lot of folks. We had always had a bit of a travel itch, wanted to experience living somewhere else, had talked about that since before we were married. I suppose I should have started by mentioning that I'm married to Scott and we have two daughters, Jillian, 13, and Tilly, who's 4. We've been in New Zealand for about 5 months now. So anyway, we had always wanted to travel and to live somewhere else. And you know how it is, life just kind of gets away from you and you start feeling roots and settled somewhere. And we actually had closed the door on it. We thought that it wasn't going to happen. I remember telling Scott that in Jillian's last year of elementary school, I said, it's this summer, it's not happening. He had some stuff going on with his career. It didn't happen. So that was it. I closed the door. Another year of school went by, and probably around Christmas, he said to me, we have to do this. It was a mistake. We should have gone. We got the ball rolling pretty quickly. We came on a student visa for Scott. It was sort of a foot in the door. He was in the military prior to his most recent career. Because of that, he had the GI Bill, which meant that they would pay for him to go to school somewhere. And if you're going to do that, why not do it somewhere fun and exciting?
Oh, yeah.
So we picked New Zealand, and beyond just picking New Zealand, he picked a major career shift. His background was in military intelligence. So he did a lot of, they called them the nerds of the military, a lot of nerdy stuff in the military. So he had about 10 years of finance, and then he got a law degree as well. And so he hated it. He hated all of it. It was very dry, very analytical, no room for creativity. And he decided, if we're going to do this, we're swinging for the fences. He decided to go to culinary school. Culinary school, yes.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yes.
How could I have forgotten that?
So he's at Le Cordon Bleu here in Wellington. That's how we settled on Wellington specifically. We chose New Zealand for a lot of the reasons that everyone does. It's just so incredibly safe here. I just absolutely love sending my kids. They walk to school. My eldest daughter will take my youngest to the dairy and pick an ice cream on the weekends,
Yeah.
It's a very Mr. Rogers neighborhood kind of feel. And I absolutely love that. Thought about the environment, that kind of thing, so a lot of reasons. But anyway, we came here on the student visa just to get our foot in the door. We were on a Zoom call with you and Brian, literally, stack of our suitcases behind us about to leave when we found out that social workers are on the green list. And since I'm trained as a social worker, we didn't know how we were going to stay. And now we do, thanks to a Zoom call with you. We're just so pleased for that.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. I've got to stop you because my brain is going, right. I've got so much to unpack, so many questions I just want to ask you. First of all, whereabouts in America were you from?
We came from Denver. Being military, we had lived all over.
Right.
But
Okay.
The last stop was Denver.
So when you say he did finance in the military, did you say Scott did finance?
He did 10 years of finance before he joined the military.
Oh,
he was an old man when he joined the military.
Right.
At
Okay.
like 27.
When I think of the military, I think of like people fighting. He was doing more like an office-based job. Sorry if I sound really ignorant. I don't know anything.
No. That's fine. Yeah, it could have been an office type job. He did deploy. And so it was cavalry, which means that they go out in front of the people who fight to scout to see if it's safe. essentially.
Right. Okay. So how long has he been in the military and how long have you been together?
So he was in the military for 6 years. We're coming up on 15 years married. He didn't surprise me. I promise. I knew he was going to join the military, but he joined the day after we got married.
Really?
We were already going to get married. We were engaged, wedding planned, and it was another one of those. He just really wanted it and talked me into it. So yeah, so he was in for 6 years.
I'm always really interested in the military because for a start, when you were a kid and you were at school and you knew kids who they were like, oh yeah, my dad's in the military. And they used to live all over the world. And I'd always think, God, that would be brilliant to be part of a family like that.
Yeah.
What is the truth like to be married to someone in the military and to be moving? You said you've moved. Have you been all around the world or just all around America?
No, I think if we had stayed in any longer, we would have gotten some of that international itch. But he was injured. And so he ended up having to get out at the end of 6 years. So we just lived, all over the US. I mean, literally from coast to coast and top to bottom, we just sort of did a circle around it.
Yeah. Just tell me, why is it when people are in the military, do they have to keep moving around? Why can't you just stay in one place and just have that job?
No, I don't know. There are many questions I have about the logistics. It's just the money they spend alone on paying to move all of these folks every 2 years. It's crazy. So, and for us, with his training, he actually had to move more often.
So he was working in finance. Then the day after you got married, he went and joined the military. Not trying to tell you anything here or anything, Katie, he goes and joins the military. Mm-hmm. And then he was in the military for 6 years. Mm-hmm. Did you have your kids at this time? Were the children born with it while he was in the military, or?
So the first was born while he was in the military, Jillian, our 13-year-old, and we got pregnant with her. We had been married about 6 months. So right. She lived in 3 states before she turned 1.
Oh.
When he deployed, we arrived in Washington State. We ended up living in the Seattle area, even though it was an hour commute for him, because the day he arrived, the first thing they said to him when he reported was, "You're deploying, so get ready." So we show up. I've got an almost 1-year-old. We know absolutely nobody, no family. It's literally the opposite corner where our family is living in the US. And I was starting a master's degree. I was starting my social work degree at that time.
Right. You've been a busy girl.
Yes. Oh my goodness. It was
and
a
that's
lot.
going to lead to the next part, when we talk about moving to New Zealand, because you're used to moving around. You're used to packing up, obviously, and moving. So that'll be interesting to talk to you about what the move to New Zealand was. But before we do that, I'm still really interested about the whole military thing. Mm-hmm. So did he come home at night, or was he away for like periods of time?
Both.
Right.
So he would wake up at about 4 o'clock in the morning and he was gone by 5. So his particular job, he was an Arabic linguist. He was also a military brat himself. So his first language was German. He picked up English after that from his parents. And, when you learn a language young, it makes it easier for you to learn language when you're older. And so he learned Arabic through the military.
As you do.
Yes, as you do. So he would go into something called a skiff, which is like super, super top secret. You can't have a cell phone. You can't bring your computer. You don't have windows. It's completely blacked out. So he would go and spend, sometimes 12, 16 hours a day, depending on what they were doing in one of those facilities. And if things were quiet and, they do rotations where you have the really busy work and then they pass that off to somebody else. So there were times where he was literally painting rocks, like they would have him paint decorative rocks to just go outside.
Okay.
So he had a wide range of things, but he'd have to go qualify with a weapon. They would take him away to another part of the state where he'd have to, spend 6 weeks or something like that. And I couldn't really communicate with him.
Yeah.
And then of course deployment.
And all this time you're studying to be a social worker, is that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Plus being a mum to 2 girls as well.
Yes. Yes.
And then you mentioned that actually, before I go on, did you just say military brats? Is that what you said?
Yes, that's a term. It's not offensive. I promise. You won't get into
I love that. That's great. Isn't it great when you're part of something and you can say it because you know that you're allowed to say it and everyone else is like, oh my God, did she just say that?
Yes, I promise. I'm not being mean.
No, that's a good term, that military brat. It sort of like sums it up, doesn't it?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So here he is in the military, you're moving around. Oh God, there's so many things I could talk to you about them. Like, I'm dying to know about that little room with no windows and all that, painting the rocks. That's a whole different conversation, but I'll save that. But, and you're working as a social worker. How did he become injured? What happened? What was the injury that he received?
He was injured actually a couple of different times in a couple of different ways. The first one happened when they were in training to deploy. He had dislocated his shoulder. Some new medics forced it back in, and it kind of ripped a whole bunch of stuff.
Ooh.
He declined surgery in order to deploy because his position was really important. And there was some stuff going on where they were essentially short-staffed in his job. So he didn't want to leave his, buddies high and dry.
Yeah.
So he delayed surgery. While he was there, he was in this tiny little facility that is sort of they have the big bases while you're deployed, which are generally safer. And he was in a tiny one that was in the outskirts.
Right.
So
just tell me what deploy means. What does deploy mean?
He was in Afghanistan.
Right.
So
deploy mean they send you to where war is?
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Well, yes. I mean, you can deploy to places that are really, really safe. Some of our friends have been deployed and they have an Applebee's on base and, lobster Fridays. But
Right, okay.
a lot of times deployed means somewhere dangerous. And so for him, he was in Afghanistan and they had where he was 5-foot walls to protect them from, the outside. And he was 6 feet tall. So, it was a bit scary. Anyway, he was in his little container with no windows, and one of those shoulder to air missiles hit right outside. And so when the blast came, he fell back and whacked his head pretty hard, and it's caused some nerve damage. Yeah.
Oh,
So he gets headaches and stuff from that.
yeah. So a missile came and hit him in the shoulder.
No. 2 separate injuries. Shoulder happened in training.
Right.
And the missile hit, it's it's a baby missile, right? It's not a big one, but it hit right outside where he was. But the force of impact causes like a shock wave,
Right.
and the shock wave blew him back.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, poor Scott. That must have been really, really scary for you and your family when you because you would have just heard he's been injured, and then you would have been thinking, oh no, wouldn't you?
Right. Well, I think he did a really good job of kind of shielding me from some of that. And I think he also, maybe with the shock, didn't realize that the injury was as bad as it was. So then when the headaches came, we kind of found out and put the pieces together when he got home.
Right.
It wasn't a walk in the park, but it was a lot better experience for us than it is for a lot of folks. And we're grateful that it wasn't worse than it was. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. When you said he was injured, I was thinking, oh no, what's happened. But so here you are living in America. He's in the military. He's been injured now. When do you start thinking, we don't want to stay here anymore? I want to change careers. Scott wants to change careers, and we want to leave the US. Just fill me in that sort of time.
I think for us, it was, the kids started school, and, this isn't a new story for most. There are a lot of school shootings in the US, a lot of that kind of thing. And for us, it wasn't just the actual shootings. I mean, those aren't great, obviously, but statistically, you're in more danger driving a car than you are going to school every day. It was sort of the atmosphere of anxiety around it, that it had created, the constant drills, and everybody was just always so worried about those things all the time. And we started looking around and realizing that most folks were working really hard for not a lot of family time and, a lot of anxiety in their lives. And so we started thinking about the things that caused us stress and looking at other parts of the world and seeing if that was a universal truth of just life, or if it was kind of just the way of life where we were. And we found that it really felt, geographical for us in a lot of cases. I don't mean to say that you can move to New Zealand and suddenly life is perfect. But, there were some things that were circumstantial.
And were you working as a social worker? Had you graduated and you have a job as a social worker now?
Yes.
I bet you saw some really, thank you, by the way. I always want to say this to people who do jobs like this. It's just, and to Scott as well. I I really, really appreciate the people that do these jobs, because we need you so much. And I just
Oh,
say thank you.
well, thank you. Yeah.
Was it, did you see lots of, I don't want to say was it a depressing job, but what did the job bring with its stresses? Did you just think, oh,
Sure.
no. Did you?
Sure. Yeah. There were times where you couldn't help someone. I think that's when it was really hard, when there were systemic issues that, couldn't be overcome. But I actually find a lot of joy in my job, so I appreciate the thank yous, but I really get so much out of it. I've loved clients in every job I've had. I've had a lot of different kinds of social work jobs. Um, and I just love being there for people when they need someone and being, accessible and compassionate and supportive, because otherwise they wouldn't have that. And I can't imagine them going through those things without it. So, yeah. The last job, to answer your question, I was working in a school. I was a school social worker. Was
Right.
the last one that I had had.
Right. So when did you have the conversation that we're going to move to New Zealand with everything that was going on, and you just thought maybe another life, just have an adventure, move somewhere else? When did you have that conversation, and how long did it take you from having that conversation to landing in Wellington?
Yep. I'm a little shy to say this because it's so much shorter of a time for us than for most people, and makes it sound very cushy for us. But Scott brought it up around December of 2022. And, I guess that it was last summer when we got here.
Right. Okay.
So
quite quick then.
right quick.
Yeah.
And I think because we came on a student visa, it was just a lot easier. And the only reason why it took us as long as it did is because I wanted to finish my contract with the school. I mean, we probably could have gotten here even quicker.
Right. And how old were your kids at this stage when you were going to move to New Zealand?
So when we moved to New Zealand, it was just a couple of days after Jillian's 13th birthday.
Right.
And Tilly's 4.
Okay.
She'll be turning 5 soon.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a big gap.
I know.
That's a big gap. That's nice.
Yeah.
Because I
A
always
little bit of a surprise.
Okay. Yeah. That's lovely though, because how lovely for her to have an older sister and just to have that connection. Anyway, I was going to tell you about my niece, but the same thing. They've got that big gap, and they get on so well. And I think, wow, that's a nice age gap, anyway.
Yes.
So they're 13. How did the kids take? I mean, I know Tilly she would have been probably a bit too young, but how about your 13-year-old?
It was really, really rough for her. I think that the reason why I had told Scott, we're going to have to do this at the end of elementary school before she starts intermediate or middle school, was because I knew that it would be really challenging to pull her out of that social environment that she was in and for her to get in to one here. I called it. She started middle school and she found a group of friends, and one in particular who she just absolutely loved in a way that, she had never had friendships like that before. And she just, when we first told her that we were going to move to New Zealand, she was like, well, okay, maybe that could be all right. She'd had enough moves before that she knew she was accustomed to a move being possible and not happening. But then when it started to get real, she was really upset. She was grieving a lot, and that manifested in a lot of sadness, a lot of crying, but also a lot of anger. And for her, what the anger looked like was mostly the silent treatment. She's a very sweet, gentle soul. But she really struggled, and her friends struggled too. I thought about a story you told once with being surprised. I think it was one of Sunny's friends who spoke to you a bit like an adult. And I don't know if you remember that, but her friend would text me and say, why are you doing this to us? Like, I'm kind of taken aback by how much of a reaction that there was. That being said, I saw how her elementary school was in general. And this was, it was a nice school. It was a good suburb. But that anxiety level and that stress level was really, really high. And having worked in the school, I knew that they did these sort of mental health surveys. And so I was able to read that data to see that it was not my perception that children were legitimately terrified about school shootings.
Oh, no.
While we were there, there was a major shooting about 20 minutes south of us. Completely unrelated, a few months later, there was another major shooting about 20 minutes north. There was sort of a fake out where we were all notified that there was a shooting at my daughter's school, when in fact there was not. There was somebody in my position in a school. We were in a suburb of Denver, and somebody in my position in a school in Denver was shot and killed. And this was just, one right after the other.
Yeah.
And even though I knew statistically that our chances were pretty good, it just didn't seem like the mental health of the kids in that environment was very good. And I could see it kind of weighing on her. I could see some subtle changes in her. And so I just kind of wanted her out of that environment.
Yeah. Totally understand that, because you would. And although your 13-year-old is, like you say, suffering and didn't want to leave her friend and giving you the silent treatment, deep down, you knew as her mum, look, this, I'm doing it for the right reasons.
Yes.
I'm not just doing it because I fancy a trip to New Zealand. I'm doing it for the right reason. I can't begin to imagine what it must be like. I really can't, to just put your kid on the bus or see them off drop them off outside the school and just live in fear. It must just be absolutely horrendous as a parent to go through that. It's just awful. It's one of those topics that I don't ever feel comfortable talking about, because I don't know what I'm talking about. I've never been there. I've never had that situation. And as much as you try and think, oh yeah, it must have been awful, you're never going to know unless you are there and you see your child going into a school building and thinking, I don't feel safe. I don't think they're safe. It must just be horrific, absolutely awful. So yeah, I like I like you being honest and telling me that your daughter was, even though she was in that situation and had lots of anxiety and things, it's almost like she'd probably with her friend feel like it's just them two, like we've got this, we're together, like we've got this little tight unit, and then to split them up would just be, it would have been hard, wouldn't it? So yeah,
I think too, like a little survivor's guilt. I think there was a part of her that was like, I'm going to go and live in this safe country, but what's going to happen to all of these kids,
That's exactly right, isn't it? Bullied. I remember getting bullied at school, and I was getting bullied with a friend. We always used to club together in the playground and be like, "Oh yeah, we won't let her get us today," And I remember my mum saying once, "Oh, do you want the day off school today?" Because she couldn't afford the bus fare, and I was like, "No, I've got to go." Like you say, it's that survival thing, isn't it? I've got to be with my friends. So yeah, I totally understand that.
Yeah.
So going back to, so you're working as a social worker and you're finishing your contract up, and then you're going to move to New Zealand. Was Scott still in the military right up until the end, or no?
He so because he was injured, he got 2 free degrees. He got a a vocational rehabilitation degree paid for, and that's why he still had his GI Bill left. He used his vocational rehabilitation to pay for law school. So he went to law school, worked as an attorney for, just like about 2 minutes, absolutely hated it. He worked for the IRS in the United States, the Internal Revenue Service, for like taxes. And so everybody was mad at him all the time because he was the tax guy, and he's just, he gets along with everybody. He's very happy-go-lucky, relaxed, jovial, everybody's friend. And so it was hard for him to be in that adversarial relationship. So he left the IRS and went back to finance. But then again, when he was there, it was just boring numbers, no creativity. He just wanted to be able to do something more adventurous and more creative. So he left the finance job to come.
Right. And he looked at universities or colleges in New Zealand and thought, I could go to New Zealand and train to be a chef. Is that right?
Yep.
It's such a good story, isn't it?
Le Cordon Bleu was one of the few that he could, because it had that 4-year bachelor's degree.
Right. So where is this? I've never heard of this place. Where is it? Is it, obviously it's in Wellington, but is it in a university building in Victoria, or?
No, they have their own building. They also share space with Tech, which is another sort of culinary school, but it's on Cuba Street. He actually Yeah, he went in, Jermaine Clement. Do you know him?
No, no.
Flight of the
Oh,
Conchords.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, he plays the crab in Moana.
Right, yes, yeah.
He ran into him like just coming out of class. It's right there on Cuba Street, so it's like in the middle of the action.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
This is just a brilliant story. So he's in the States and he's like, right, okay, I'll tell you what then, Katie, we're all going to move to New Zealand. I'm going to train to be a cordon bleu chef. The military is going to pay for it. Is that right? Because he was injured,
Correct.
the military is going to pay for it. Okay.
And housing.
And housing as well. How long
Yes.
for?
Until he graduates. I mean, he has 3 years to do a 3-year program.
Right. Is that because the military want to look after him because he was injured? So it's their way of saying, okay, we can retrain you and you can go out into the world and get another job. Is that right?
That's why they paid for the law degree.
Yes.
But anybody who joins the military in the US has the GI Bill and to pay. And I think it's because, the military is a really hard job and people wouldn't do it if there weren't some sort of incentive. So people who can't pay for college otherwise will often join the military to get that GI Bill so that they can get a degree.
And they didn't mind that it was in New Zealand. They never said, oh, no, you've got to stay in the US if you're going to do this. Never mind over to New Zealand to be a chef.
No, I wouldn't say that they minded, but the system is very challenging if you're going to go to school overseas. So they just created a law where the school overseas has to have a US bank account. And there is a way around it, but it's a very complicated system. And long story short, we ended up having to write to a couple of senators and getting their offices to apply pressure on the Veterans Administration to get them to do what they were supposed to do. It was super stressful because the school didn't actually get paid. And we didn't actually, well, they didn't pay the school until Scott was in school for about 3 months. And the same thing with our housing. So we just had to live off of credit cards and hope and pray that it all came through. Yeah. We had to pay his tuition up front because we couldn't get our visa until the tuition was paid. So we had to do all of that out of pocket and then get reimbursed. So it was a bit challenging, worth it in the end, I think, but just knowing that when you go into it, there are going to be some hurdles on the front end. Yeah.
So far, what I'm seeing is a woman who is a fantastic job social worker. So you're giving lots to society by doing your social work job. You're looking out for your kids because you want them out of that school because it's giving them anxiety and there's dangers going on there that you'd rather they weren't a part of. And you've got a husband who is just flitting you all around the country, changing careers here and there and everywhere. Now, when you get to New Zealand, what about you? What are you going to be working or what is it? Tell me about you and how you felt when you came to New Zealand.
Well, I mean, I loved it. I mean, you know how it is. I woke up every day. I couldn't believe that we were here. It wasn't just the gorgeous scenery, right? It's beautiful. Everything here is beautiful. But I remember we got off the airport and we bought, plug converter things, and they gave us one of those green bags. I still don't really know what that's made out of, but it wasn't plastic.
Was it a flax bag?
I guess, yes. I don't know. Being an American, I'm very used to, the things that are the worst for the environment. But straws are paper and utensils are paper, and people are kind. They're just so kind and so ready to help you. I mean, you can stop anybody and they'll take the time to give you directions to where it is that you're trying to go. And it just felt so much more relaxed. So I was really, really pleased. I will admit that I told Scott there were some conditions in us getting here. One was that we had to take our kids to Disney, and we did that. And then the other was that I had to take Jillian to a Broadway show. And so we did that. And then Hamilton.
Oh, great.
And she knows every single word. She absolutely loves it. And then for me, it was at least 3 months lying around the house eating bonbons. I was just going to be lazy and take some time off. And I did it, Liz. It was amazing. I enjoyed every second of it.
And that was when you got to New Zealand, you took the time off. Yeah, good for you.
Yes.
Good for you.
So yeah, and it was really great because I was able to help get the kids acclimated because, there was still a bit of a rough transition after we got here for Jillian. A lot of weighing, is this a moment where I let her sulk in the bed, or is this a moment where we kind of force her out to be with the family and engage and like see the world? And so there was just a lot of that I was doing, and I was able to invest that time and energy to do it and have some time for me too. So it was great. I'm now interviewing for jobs as a social worker. It will very likely be in a hospital because social workers are so new to the green list. What I'm finding is that the employers that are accredited, because you have to have an accredited employer, are all people who have been previously hiring nurses. Those are the only people who are already accredited, which makes sense. So that's my focus right now, is probably a hospital.
So coming home, sorry, yeah, actually, I'll stay with that. Coming home to New Zealand on Scott's student visa, it actually meant that you couldn't work on that visa, didn't it?
Right, because he was a bachelor's level. If you have
Right.
a master's degree or higher, then the spouse or partner will be entitled to work, and the children will have access to public schooling. But
Right.
for us, we are essentially visitor visas. The kids are not supposed to have access to public school unless we pay for them as international students. And I can't work in any capacity. So until I get my green list visa.
And then you'll get your own visa.
Mm-hmm.
So the kids are in New Zealand now, in Wellington, in school.
Yes. So
how's that working? How are you paying for that, or?
I should correct myself to say that Tilly does have access to the 20 hours subsidized kindy.
Right.
And so that's where she is. So we're not paying so much for that. They do keep her beyond the 20 hours and ask for donations. And so we donate. But Jillian's school is just the school right up the road. It's not, we love it, but it's not anything fancy. And we're paying $8,000 a semester or $4,000 a term.
Oh,
for
that's,
her.
isn't it?
Painful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ugh,
Oh,
it is.
but talk to me about that, because we
Yeah.
had that conversation about, because when you told me, I was like, oh, what? Like, just, you could always homeschool, but then if you homeschooled, you wouldn't be able to work. Yeah, you wouldn't be able to
Right.
do your job if you homeschooled. So
Well,
go on.
and Jillian wanted that social connection. So I actually had the same thought as you when we came. I was like, when we first brought it up, and she was like, okay, I would do that. I'm like, perfect. And I'll homeschool you and it'll be perfect. And
Yeah.
then after, she went through the journey that she had to go through emotionally, I realized that really having her connected socially was going to be important. And she also let me know quite clearly that she was not interested in homeschooling with me. She had done it before and we had a blast, but she was 7 then, and she's 13 now and cool. And
Yeah.
so anyway, so we bit that bullet to pay for her to go to school and because of that. But I think that what you may have been getting to is what I had said before, is that when you look at, if we were to stay here long enough to get her permanent residency and potentially citizenship, that would entitle her to in-state tuition at universities here. And when you look at what it is that we're going to end up draining out of her college savings account to pay for her to go to school now, we are coming out ahead. We're going to save so much more money. When you compare the cost of university in the US to what it is in New Zealand, it's just astronomical. It's quite frankly unobtainable for a lot of people to go to university in the US.
How much is it to go to university in the US?
I can ballpark
Yeah.
200, something like that. And I think I've looked these numbers.
US dollars.
Yeah,
for like a really, really good degree. What about just like normal degrees?
That, I think that would be like a normal degree. Yeah, and then of course,
I was going to say the degree that I went for, but I dropped out. Mine was media studies, which I have no idea what that means. It just means like you're just going to go and have a good time. But how much would something like that cost?
Yeah, probably about that. I mean, I know a lot of people who graduate with 100,000, 200,000 just in student loans, and that doesn't include what they, the scholarships they may have gotten, or help they may have gotten. Yeah.
Crazy, isn't it?
It is. And then, of course, a lot of those universities are in big towns. They're not in the rural areas. So the cost of living there is quite high. You used to have dormitories and things of that nature. And, student housing is on the decline, more and more people in apartments. And so it's just gotten really expensive. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but they have a lot of online universities that are not accredited. And those have pulled students away from the universities. So the universities have had to get fancier facilities to compete, and B, raise the cost of tuition on the average person. And that's why college professors, my mother was one, a lot of them are on like food stamps. It's very hard to get tenure. It's very hard to get a living wage to teach college. So their wages are going down, but the cost is going up for students.
And do you happen to know how much it is to go to university in New Zealand?
I think it was like 20,000 I looked up.
That is
Something
it. So
like
what you're
that.
saying is the money that you've saved in your college fund for your girls, it's even paying these school tuition fees at the moment until you get your residency is nowhere near what it would have cost you had you stayed in the US.
Right. I think that at the end of the day, before, knock on wood, before we get permanent residency, I expect to have spent about 16,000.
Yeah.
And, we'll make that back in spades, assuming she decides to go to university, and, we're certainly not pushing her in any direction, but yes, absolutely. And then, you look at her having the ability to just live here and be a citizen here through global warming or whatever else. It's just worth it. Even if she doesn't go to university, it's worth it for her to have that option.
I was just going to say to you, do you know what? I think you're the first person, I'm just thinking if I've ever chatted to anyone else on the podcast who's been paying for school fees like this. I don't think so. I think there have been a couple that thought they would have to, but then the visa came through, so they didn't have to. Is it worth it? Do you ever sit there and think, oh, God, all this money, we could just be at home not paying anything. Is it worth it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. All day, every day. I have absolutely no regrets. We don't have quite as much saved for Tilly yet because she's young. And so that's a bit of a, pressure for us. But because we had the savings, it doesn't affect our monthly budget. We're just pulling out of this money that we wouldn't have been able to touch anyway, because it has to be spent on some sort of education. But like I said, being able to live and work in New Zealand. And so I'm thinking that she will have the ability to do that for the rest of her life. So yes, taking a bit of a financial hit now to give that to her, and then likely her children and their children and so on and so forth. I mean, it's generations of people who are going to have access to this beautiful country, and more importantly, this beautiful way of life, this beautiful community.
Okay, see, I love your attitude. I absolutely love it. It's so warm and infectious. It really is. It's just, yeah, I love it. That's all I'm going to say. And talking about the thing about money, because this is the thing that people get so, I don't want to say het up over, but they stay on it and they keep on it, and it's just like, You
Yes.
said something in our live Zoom. We do a monthly live Zoom for our Slack group. And you were thankfully a guest on last week's Zoom, and you mentioned, and again, I love the attitude. You said,
You are here because you love New Zealand.
You might be moving to New Zealand,
Living in New Zealand, or you might just spend your days dreaming of visiting this gorgeous country. Because we love New Zealand as much as you do, we have compiled a short and very unique 5-day video series showcasing life in New Zealand, what it's really like. These videos are real, they are exclusive, and best of all, they're absolutely free. So if you would like to view New Zealand from the inside out and find out what life is really like down here, sign up now, and every day for 5 days we will send you a personal 3-minute video showcasing some brilliant aspect of life in New Zealand. You are gonna love it. Go to www.itsadrama.com/ILoveNZ. We can't wait to share those videos with you. Okay, let's get back on with the show.
I love the attitude. You said, I am actually finding that Wellington isn't as expensive as where we come from in the US. And that was such a breath of fresh air because I'm so used to, and I rightly so, I know New Zealand is expensive. So,
Right.
you know, but it was a breath of fresh air because to hear someone actually say the opposite for a change, you know, just talk to me about that. What made you say that?
Yeah, well, there's somebody right before that group met, right before that Zoom call. I went onto the Slack group and I saw where somebody had posted this, and I wish I had written down the name of it. It starts with an N, I believe, N or an M, I can't remember. Anyway, you can Google comparing cost of living in different places worldwide, and that's how I found it when I forgot what it was that she had written in the chat there in the Slack group. And I plugged in Denver, and then I plugged in Wellington, and sure enough, it was like 17% cheaper cost of food, and this percent cheaper for rent. And it went down in every single thing. It was cheaper in Wellington than it was in Denver. And that was really validating for me because I'll be honest with you, Liz, like I have heard a lot of folks, expats all over the place, talking about the cost of living in New Zealand. And the people born and raised here certainly talk about it all the time. I think that there's a lot of comparison to Australia. And my guess is that the cost of living here has risen. And so it feels very dramatic to folks here. And they don't realize perhaps how bad it is in other parts of the world. I don't know. It's just a theory. I might be totally off base. But hearing all of these people talk about how prohibitively expensive New Zealand is, I sat Scott down because he's the money guy like a couple of different times, and I was like, we need to have a talk because you're telling me that we can afford to live here, but from what I'm hearing, there should be no way that we can afford to live here. I kept having these like internal little freakouts that we must be doing something really financially irresponsible, and I didn't know because everyone kept telling me how expensive it was. And yet we're able to afford groceries and we're able to afford to heat our house. And it's not that bad compared to the US, or it hasn't seemed it. So anyway, it was validating for me when I found the website and they had run the numbers. And sure enough, it says that it is definitively cheaper to live in Wellington, New Zealand than it is to be in Denver, Colorado. So I asked Scott to go over with me some numbers just to be sure I wasn't completely off base. One thing I think is the electric. So in Denver, we had a house, Denver is a mile closer to the sun than other parts of the US, than most of the US. So it's similar to New Zealand in that the sun can feel quite brutal. And we had a very sunny house. It was just so expensive to air condition our house. And even when we were air conditioning our house, we would put up boxes over the windows, cardboard. We were blacking the whole house out in the middle of summer. It was very dark in our house because it was still 80 degrees. And we were just running, I'm sorry, I don't know Celsius. Yeah,
No.
Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
But it was hot all the time. But then in the summer, it was cold all the time. In New Zealand, you got to get through the winter. And yes, your electric is going to be a bit higher when you're getting through the winter. But then you kind of make it back in the summer when all you need to do is crack some windows and feel that lovely breeze. So in New Zealand, we have paid so far, and we haven't really experienced much summer yet. But we have paid, I would say 300 to 600 NZD. A month would be like the range. Whereas in the US, it was 600, 700 all year long. It was really bad. We also looked at a house sort of similar in quality to the one that we're in now. The one that we're in now, we're in Thorndon. So it's about like a 2-minute walk to the CBD. So it's pretty close. You would expect parts of New Zealand that are more rural, right? The housing is going to be more affordable than where we are right now. So I'm comparing a house that's basically CBD, Central Business District, to one that is 20 minutes outside of town in the Denver area. So one that's a little bit more rural. And it was a 61% increase to live in Denver, in the Denver area, than the house here. The housing was a lot more expensive when we just sort of tried to compare those things. Another thing is cars. Right? In the US, there was not a lot of, everything was really far. You had to drive everywhere.
Mm.
There wasn't a lot of public transportation, and the cities were structured in such a way where everything is spaced out really far. So even just driving to go pick up groceries or, trying to get your kid craft supplies or whatever the case may be, you had to have a car. And unless you and your partner were together 24/7, you might really need to have two cars. And of course, every job you have is supposed to be 40 hours a week, but it's 45, 50, so it's a lot of work to maintain cars. Fuel is definitely more expensive here, but we actually found that we don't need a car. It's change, it's pocket change to go ride the incredibly well-run, in my opinion, public transportation around this area. So we're not having to pay for that car insurance. We're not worried about car payments. We're not worried about fuel. We do sometimes want to get out of town. And so there's Mevo, these like little cars you can rent by the hour, and they're all over the place. And so we'll just grab a Mevo and ride out of town and, do some sightseeing and then come back. So it's been really great. That's another way that we've saved a lot of money.
Mevo? I've never heard of that. What is it?
Oh my gosh. But it's a car rental
And
thing.
they're just all over and you just rent them.
Yeah, you can open the app and it'll say that there's one within a 5-minute walk from where you are, and then you can click to rent it, and then you walk over and you just pick it up.
I did not know
And
this.
the key is run through the app on your phone. So you just hit the button on your phone to unlock it, and you can hit the button to lock it. And
That is genius.
it is
Like
absolutely
those
genius.
scooters that they leave around town, but now it's a car.
Exactly. And it's electric. Most of them are electric. Perhaps all of them are electric.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Oh, I've got to tell Bri about that. I didn't know about that. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
It is. It's
Is that a New
absolutely
Zealand thing, or is that all around the world?
Mevo is a New Zealand company. Yes.
Right.
Mhm.
Oh,
So
that's
I don't know, they may have something similar in other places, but Mevo is New Zealand.
That is fantastic. And do you know what? Me and you should do a podcast on the cost of living in New Zealand, because this is so inspiring, to be honest, and so, what's the word? Reassuring, I'm sure, to people who are in these states at the moment, because you're talking from the States point of view, the US, just that, because we hear it time and time and time and time again, just how, you're going to really notice it. You're really going to struggle. You're really going to do that. And actually, I love your attitude. You share the same kind of the attitude, exactly the same as I do. Whereas, like, yes, that's expensive, but who cares, because you can make it up here. So
Exactly.
it all plays out, doesn't it, Katie? Exactly like you were just saying about the kids as well, with the school and just, yeah, I love your attitude. I absolutely love it, because that's the kind of attitude you need to be thinking of when you're coming over is, rather than focusing on, how much is everything, what's my less? It's like, no, what's your abundance? What's your more? Like, how are you going to make it up? So yeah, we should do that. We should do a podcast.
I think, oh yeah, absolutely. I'd love that. Scott might also, be a good one for that too. But I think you have to have a bit of fortitude to have that attitude, because so many people will be trying to convince you that it's bad. And,
why people do that?
I don't know. I don't know. Like my theory again is that people moving to New Zealand probably heard it from locals, and that for locals, it probably feels true because they're comparing it to New Zealand 10, 15, 20 years ago. And perhaps it is way worse, but
you're right.
Yeah, it's one of those things.
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, it's one of those things that you can believe that it's true. You can not notice where you're saving money or where you're making things up, simply because people are kind of drawing your attention to that negative.
Yeah.
So,
and you know what? I'm guilty of that myself. And you are spot on when you say that it's locals who, because we have noticed such a big increase in prices, and like I do it all the time. I'm like to Brian, flipping $3.50 for an avocado. Like, I remember when they were 99 cents, even though they are 99 cents again now. But, that kind of thing where you're thinking, oh, I'm sure it never used to be this expensive. I'm sure it never used to cost me that much money. So, yeah, you're right. Because when we went back to the UK last year, Tesco's, Sainsbury's, exactly the same, if not more expensive than New Zealand. So, but you tend to have that little rose tinted glasses, I do anyway. And you're like, oh, I'm sure it was cheaper back there. It wasn't. It's not at all. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. I'll just tell you a story. Tess phoned me up last night. You know, she lives in Wellington. She's down in a flat and everything. She phoned me up just crying, like, oh, I got $350. It's just cost me in the supermarket. That's between two of them, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. I was like, what is that for a couple of days? No, that's for a week. And I said, well, tell me what you bought then. She said, well, I got some really nice organic steaks and I got a couple of salmon fillets and I got loads of vegetables and fruit. And then we got this really nice oaty milk that we're drinking now. And she's like listing off all this stuff. And I said, so really it's cost you about $160 each. And I said, and you've got all that food and it's going to last you all week. She said, do you not think that's a bit much? And I said, no, I don't. I said, I think that's a flipping bargain actually, Tess. Stop moaning.
Yeah.
No.
I will say this though, I feel like because there's so much hyperbole around it being so expensive here, I see a lot of products for like gardening or even creating like window gardens where you can grow like small things just in your window if you don't have a lot of land. And I love that too, because I love the idea of raising my kids in a place where they're connected to that kind of stuff. They know how to grow things, they know how to cook things because we're cooking so much at home. You know, and it's, you know, what's in it, right? If you grew it, like, you know exactly where it came from. And there's a lot of that returning to the earth and simplicity built into the structure of the lifestyle here. So I do love that.
Oh, I absolutely love it. I could talk to you for hours and hours about all this because you're such an interesting person. Like I say, your attitude is infectious. It's absolutely wonderful. And I know that you're going to be in New Zealand forever, like, you know, and your kids will be in New Zealand forever. And that this is your home now. So that's really exciting. But before I let you go, because I'm aware of the time and I've kept you quite a while, but before I let you go, how's Scott liking his cordon bleu chef? And also, does he cook for you at night? Does he come home and go, oh, look what I've made? Just tell me.
So Jillian is also doing cooking classes through school. That's just a part of her intermediate school that they do. So she is bringing home delicious food, and then he's bringing home delicious food. And I am just high on the hog around here, Liz. It is amazing. And the stuff that he's learned in such a short period of time, and what he's actually doing is kind of, you know, mostly business, not a lot of cooking, but he gets some of that cooking. He's absolutely loving it.
Oh. So does he want to come out and be a cordon bleu chef? Is that what his dream is? No. Oh, God. For God's sake. What does he want to do then?
I don't think that he knows yet, but that's the thing, is that he feels that sense of freedom, you know, and for the first time ever, I think that we haven't felt like we needed to have every single thing mapped out. But right now he's experimenting with this. He's having a lot of fun. He doesn't want to work until 1 o'clock in the morning. He doesn't want to have, you know, work every single holiday. You know what that's like, right? Because you were there once. So I don't know, he might do event planning or catering or something, but whatever it is, he's going to do something creative. It's going to be something that feeds his soul. And we live in a country now where people don't look at you like you're weird if you want to prioritize that kind of well-being. So we'll see what the future holds.
Yeah. And that's so exciting. And I absolutely love that he's living, your little family are here just with this huge adventure in front of you. And you can do anything that you want to do. And I love the fact that you just think, do you know what? I don't know what he wants to do yet. You know, he hasn't decided what he's going to do yet, because isn't that just the best? Isn't that when all the ideas flow? And yeah, again, another big topic, but New Zealand is the place where no one's going to say to you, oh, I don't think so, mate. That's not going to work, is it? You know, it's just all about, yeah, go for it.
Yes.
And that's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic. When's your job interview? When's your job interview?
Yesterday.
Oh, it was yesterday. But how did it go?
I don't know. I don't want to jinx myself. I thought it went really well. I hope they agree with me. We'll see. So I should have news, I think, by the end of next week. I'll update you on Slack.
Yes, do. Yeah. And please, let's do another podcast together where I mean, I could talk to you about anything, but I just love it's very interesting, the whole cost of things and how you're finding the cost of things. And I know that you said Gillian, I don't know if you would be up for this, but I know that you said Gillian would love to just speak about her experience.
Yes.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing to have her chat to me about that. even if you both come on, if you want to chaperone her or whatever, do whatever you want to do. I mean, I don't know what you do with, I don't know.
Yeah.
That would be absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, she's very excited. She's like, oh, your friend Liz, I'd love to talk to her. So she feels like she knows you quite well already.
Oh, no, that would be absolutely fantastic. But until then, fingers crossed for this job. I can't imagine anyone nicer to have as a social worker than you. You are just so lovely, so gorgeous. Like I say, love your attitude, Katie. Thank you for choosing New Zealand to move to and bring your family to. It's just, I feel very, very honored to have you living under the same sky as me. So thank you so much. And then until next time, then I'll speak to you again soon.
Bye.
Okay, Katie. See you soon. Bye.
I really hope you enjoyed that show as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're moving to New Zealand and you are interested in joining the Slack group, the private community group that we raved about and talked about on today's show, then you need to head over and get our free 5-day video guide. This is a video guide that sends you a video every day for 5 days, sharing some aspect of what life in New Zealand is like. It's absolutely free. And then when you get to the 5th day, you will be given the option of whether or not you want to join the private community, the one that we talked about. It's a fabulous, fabulous resource. I don't need to say anything more because you've already heard all about it. Go over, take the free 5-day video guide, get to day 5, and then you can decide whether or not you'd like to be a member and join our private community along with me and Brian and all those other fabulous people that are walking along the same path as you and making the move to New Zealand. So head on over to www.nzahead.com/free. Head on over to www.nzahead.com/free and get your free 5-day video guide. Get to day 5 and then you decide if you want to come and join us in our private membership group. I hope to see you on the other side. Buying a house is one of life's major purchases that you will ever make. You'll never spend more money than when you're about to buy your own house. It feels stressful, it feels like you're being rushed, and will you make the right decision? So why, when we're buying a house in New Zealand, is it made to feel that little bit more stressful?
We had one agent say that, well, the sellers don't know what it's worth. And I said, then how do you do your job when you have no idea what this house is worth? That's just ridiculous.
Why did they do it though, Dan? Is it just greedy or what?
In this week's episode, you're going to meet Dan. Dan moved from the US to New Zealand 2 years ago. When he was in the US, he worked as a real estate agent for 30 years, and he's just bought his own home in New Zealand. He's going to share with you everything there is to know, tips, secrets, little tricks about how to make buying a house in New Zealand that little bit easier. So let's jump on in and see Dan.